Hello, book lovers, and welcome to episode 4 of Dad and Daughter Reads, a book club podcast. I'm James, aka Dad, and I'm so excited to have you with us today because we've reached the grand finale of Blood Over Brighthaven by M.O. Wang. That's right, we're diving into chapters 19 through 23 and wrapping up our very first book club pick. But of course, I'm not doing this alone. As always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host. She's got the hottest takes. It's Miranda. What have you been up to this week?
Hello. Just the usual, working and hanging out with friends, dancing at the club to Bad Bunny, had a Reiki session yesterday, typical Miranda things. About you?
Well, my week has been hectic. I got a big deployment at work, so I've been pretty busy with that. And I had a colonoscopy this morning, so that was fun. Last night was more fun. That's why I'm a little bit tired today, but I'll make it through. What about reading? What have you been reading this past week?
Well, I started listening to Crying in H Mart this week during my commutes on the subway. I can get easily distracted though when I'm listening to an audiobook, so it's taken me a while to get through it, but I like it so far. What about you, Dad?
Yeah, I know how that goes with audiobooks because I've been listening to the Henry Winkler audiobook and I actually haven't listened to it in like 2 weeks. I have too many podcasts I have to get through first. I have to listen to all my weekly podcasts before I can get to the book, and sometimes I just don't make it even all the way through those. I only listen when I go work out or drive around, and I don't really drive around much. But anyway, though, I have finished Parable of the Sower for my work book club. You've read that, so you know what's going on there. Environmental collapse, wildfire, socioeconomic inequality, where only the wealthy can afford security and clean water, government, and institutional failures. Man, doesn't that sound familiar? You know, it's like this book is a warning for us, and if we don't take heed, we may end up here, shortly.
Well,
Anyway.
we'll see.
I also started Assassin's Quest, which is the third book in the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. Looking to finish this by Friday. Today's Tuesday. I don't think I'm going to make it, though. Might take me a couple extra days, but I'll still be on track for 52 books for the year. That'll give me 5 books when I do finish it. So might take a couple extra days into February to get that done, but I think I'll be all right. So before we move on, I'd like to talk about the upcoming book club schedule. So the plan is to read James by Percival Everett next. The first episode will be out Friday, February 7th, so a week from the time this podcast comes out. And this book is going to be covered in only 3 episodes instead of 4 because it's a little bit shorter. The book itself is also split into 3 parts. So the first episode will cover part 1, chapters 1 through 17. The second episode will be part 1, chapters 18 through 32, and that episode will be out on February 14th. And the finale will cover parts 2 and 3. Part 1 is much longer than 2 and 3, obviously. And that will be out on February 21st. And we are hoping to have a vote on the third book of our series. So be looking out for that. I'll put it on Discord and Blue Sky. You can get the links to those in the show notes. And I'll probably start the vote on February 7th.
A democracy here.
Yes, if we can get enough people to vote. If not, it'll just be yours and mine. So I don't know how that's going to work out if we vote on 2 different things.
I'm sure we can come to some sort of agreement.
Yeah.
But yeah, you guys vote. Look forward to it. Start. Are you gonna put everything up on the 7th?
Yeah, I'll put it on the 7th. I'll put it on Blue Sky. I'll put it in Discord. There's also a new app that just came out today called Tome Fantasy. It seems pretty cool. It's all bookish. So it's like a complete social app about books only. It's called Tome Fantasy though. But I don't think they just make it only fantasy books. I'm sure sci-fi and any other contemporary is also welcome, I'm sure. But yeah, I got on there today. It seems pretty cool. I'll have links for our user on Tome in the show notes.
I'll have to look into that. What's it like? Like,
It's kind of almost like Instagram. So pictures, but you can pick books too. And then you can just like do book reviews. It lets you rate books if you pick a book, but it also videos go there too. So you can have videos. So I don't know how long the videos can be though, but I did post one on our Dad and Daughter Reads account already. That was about 1.5 minutes long. I don't know if there's a limit, but we'll find out.
That's really cool. Okay. Exciting.
All right. Let's move on to the social media book buzz. A little bit of controversy with an author named Rena Kent. So Rena Kent is a white woman that lives in London, and she writes dark romance novels, but it's kind of a contemporary type of fantasy setting. A lot of her books take place in France, North Africa, and London. And she's most known for her Legacy of God series. In an interview, she was asked if she would ever write a Black main character. Here's her answer, and I'm quoting her. I am not able to write about Black people as main characters. I don't have Black people's social experience and therefore can't accurately represent them. So out of respect, I do not write about Black people as main characters. So there was a video by a Black woman on TikTok, and she was calling Rena Kent a racist because Ms. Kent said she wouldn't write Black characters. I can't find the video right now because I think it's been removed. I think that woman kind of got dragged because I saw a lot of other Black women saying that Miss Kent's answer is the correct answer. If you don't feel like you can do it justice, then just don't do it. And I agree with that. So Miranda, you like to write. What do you think about writing characters outside of your lived experience?
Yeah, so this is actually something that I've had discussions with peers at length. This was always a hot button issue in theater, which is, fun fact, what I have my degree in. Well, most of the time, discussions were most about colorblind casting or should an actor play a part that's outside of their own lived experience. We did talk a lot about playwrights and authors doing the same. I'm on Ken's side. When it comes to race and sexuality, i.e. social experiences, I don't think you should be writing in depth main characters outside of what you culturally are and what you identify as, because it's such a different way of life and struggle from your own. And trying to pretend you understand the social struggles of another culture or group of people doesn't sit right with me. Just like when a man writes horrible, stereotypical female characters, a woman's just going to write better about women than a man is because she understands the ways women have been treated in society better than a man does. Same goes with race and sexuality. But with that, touching on men writing female main characters, because they do, and they have, and they will continue to. And women also write male main characters as well. So I don't necessarily think people can't write outside their social experiences, just maybe that they shouldn't. And if they do, they risk telling a really bad story and being seen as out of touch and offensive.
Right. So let me ask you this. Can you name a man that you've read that has written a good female main character, or even just female character in general, if not necessarily a main character?
I think Pierce Brown. So a lot of people give Pierce Brown flack because he fridged Io, one of the female characters in the very beginning, the first one that we really meet, because it's the main character's wife. But after that, all of the other female characters that he writes about, they're so extremely powerful. I think there was a point of him doing it because I think the main character, Darrow, he is living in the society where they live in a patriarchal society, and then when he goes to live with the Golds, it's not so patriarchal. They're a little more equal. So I think it was an important growth because you see Darrow start to view women as not these weaker creatures that he has to protect and save. He starts to really be like, oh, these women are quite capable and powerful of doing things on their own. Because even with him and Virginia, they have this really mutual respect for each other, and they know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And when they need, they're really good partners. So I think Pierce Brown did that so that we could see the character growth through Darrow, and I think he does a really good job of writing female characters.
Yeah, I would definitely say Victra is not a weak character.
No, Victor's not a weak character, but neither is Virginia. She's very,
neither
very
is
smart.
Virginia.
Virginia's one of my favorite characters ever. I love Virginia. I think she's such a badass because she's a badass. She's capable of fighting, but she's also so smart.
Right.
And he really Darrow really sees that and recognizes it, and I think that's something that he has to learn how to do over time. So I like that. I think Pierce Brown does a good job. A lot of people get mad because they only read the first book, and so that's all they know. But if you read the whole series, you can kind of tell. You can see the growth of the characters, right, including the women characters. So,
and of course, I think as the series goes on, he becomes a better writer in general too.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah.
But yeah.
With more
so
experience.
I think he did a good job. That's the only one I can think of off the top of my head. I feel like I typically read more stories written by women in general, though, honestly.
Yeah. So getting back to the subject, we went off a little tangent there with my question. So as far as Black characters and outside of your lived experience, I think in a true fantasy setting, a white person can write a Black character a little more easily because you don't have to deal with everything that Black people have had to deal with in the modern world, like slavery. Maybe Black characters weren't slaves in the fantasy world, so you don't have to deal with stuff like that. But in a contemporary type novel, which is what Rena Kent writes, even though it is a fantasy setting, it still uses contemporary stuff. So that would definitely be a lot more more difficult for someone who hasn't lived that experience. In the long run, it's a lose-lose situation anyway, because people are going to give an author crap for not writing outside their lived experiences. But then if they do and try to do that and they completely screw it up, then they're really going to get dragged and probably even to the point of being canceled, right?
Right. But this is also why I don't necessarily like the term lived experience. I think it's tricky. I'd rather use like a social experience because we don't live in a fantasy world. No one's lived through a fantasy experience. So it's not so much writing outside your lived experiences because you can and you should, or we wouldn't have fantasy or magical realism or just stories in general that are outside your own imagination. But it's instead knowing when you can't even begin to imagine the battles other cultures and groups of people in our society have lived through. And I think that being a storyteller just requires a lot of nuance and it requires a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah, I agree. That is a better way to term it, I think. And so this woman that made the video calling Miss Kenna racist, maybe she should just read more Black authors. There's plenty of them out there, and you should be reading them. Everyone should be. Read more Black authors. Everybody. That's including you. So
Yes.
the only thing I can think is maybe she's a huge Rena Kent stan, and she just wanted her to write a Black character, so it feels a little more closer to her because she is a Black woman. I understand that, but I think she went a little bit over the line calling her a racist in her video.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, I mean, I always hear the argument from my friends or other people of color that what she said was that was the correct thing to do. I think it would be more racist to write about an experience that you don't know anything about.
Right. And even if you did research, that's still not probably enough.
Yeah, no, it's not because you don't know, you haven't lived through the struggles, the aggressions, the microaggressions
Right.
that have shaped you as a person because those things shape us as people. So also, if you haven't read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, then you should because it touches on this very subject.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I'm actually going to read that next.
Well, it literally is about everything that we just talked about here.
Cool.
So perfect. That's also an easy read. So if you do finish this book a little bit later, I mean, I think I read Yellowface in like 2 days.
Yeah, it's pretty short. I think it's only like 350 pages or so. I could probably do that in 2 nights or so.
But it also just goes really fast. The pacing is really good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I bet that you should be able to stay on track then if that's your next one.
Yeah.
But yeah, it touches on that very thing, on authors and whether or not they should be writing outside of their own lived or cultural social experiences.
On to some other drama. So Onyx Storm, the big hit book that everybody was trying to buy, and some people couldn't find it and they were crying. Oh my God. Anyway, there was a Target special edition of Onyx Storm. So this edition included some interior artwork in the book, and it had illustrations that turned out to be stock images that were altered. Now, this isn't Target's fault. A lot of people were blaming Target for this. I mean, Target just signed a deal with Red Tower, who's the publisher, to sell in a special edition. So it's not their fault. They didn't make the book. That would be Red Tower. They're the publisher. This isn't illegal or anything. I'm sure they paid for these stock images. But to me, when you're selling a limited edition special book or a limited special edition book that is so very popular and has made your company millions of dollars, people are expecting to see some exclusive artwork, I think, not changed stock images. Of course, doing it that way is always cheaper. And I'm reading the Farseer trilogy, right? And I have the illustrated versions of that book. And you can tell that the artwork in there was made specifically for the book. And they are really awesome. They're great. I like seeing them in there. And at the end of the book, there's a blurb that's dedicated to the artist. It talks about who the artist is. And in the beginning of the very first book, there was a foreword by Robin Hobb, the writer, who talked about how she met the artist over in, I think it was France or Italy somewhere. And that's how she picked her to do these illustrations. So I think you need to do something like that and not use stock images. And these stock images, they weren't new. So they weren't AI created. They've been around a while on different places like Shutterstock. In fact, I think I have an older D&D book that has some of the same stock images in it.
Oh.
Yeah. So what do you think about, should they have made new artwork for that book? What's your take?
Yeah, to me, it just sounds like they were being cheap. I don't know if it's justified or not, but just would have been better and nicer to hire an artist to do artwork specifically for the book because it just all feels kind of lazy to me.
Yeah.
But that's really all about I feel about it. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of crazy though. I mean, those books are selling like hotcakes. I mean, some people couldn't find them. So obviously they're making out enough money off of them to hire an artist, I think. And I think it's just shitty on their part to do it that way. But hey,
Yeah.
what do I know? I'm not a book publisher.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows what little corners they're cutting in order to pocket more money for their CEO?
I mean, honestly, I'm surprised they weren't AI at this point.
Right. Yeah. Truly.
They were altered, but I wonder how they altered them. I wonder if they used AI to alter them because they didn't look exactly the same. I mean, they were very close, but there was some different coloring, which somebody could do that pretty easily, Photoshop, whatever. All right, that's all the drama we have for today in the world of social media. We can move on to our discussion of the last 5 chapters of Blood Over Brighthaven. But first, let's have a recap.
Okay, so the last 6 chapters. In the last chapters, Siona decides to do something about what she now knows about the other realm. She confronts Brigham and finds out that this is something all high mages eventually discover, and it's something they all just have to come to terms with because it's all God's plan. She is surprised and disappointed by this, even though Thama warned her this was probably the case. Later, while trying to make a plan for what to do next, she runs into Renthorn, who knows what she knows and what she saw. He sexually assaults her, and Thomel comes to pull him off. Renthorn is knocked unconscious, and knowing no one will believe a woman or Quen about what really happened, she fires Thomel for being clumsy. Thomel's escorted away by the guards and later beaten. Siona saves the spellograph that Thomel broke in anger and has her cousin Alba fix it. Siona goes to tell Thomel and Kara of her plan, which involves Siona and Kara breaking into the Magus Center to sabotage one of the reserve towers. During this covert op, Siona also sneaks into the Archmage Supreme Ornell's office and steals a couple of action spells from the barrier extension spell. Thomel and Siona share a nice moment together as he speaks in his experience being Quen in Tiran and the challenges that he's faced.
And we'll go into the last 5 chapters now. So chapter 19 was Mage's Mirror. So there's a comment at the beginning of this chapter about fixing the ceiling she broke at the very beginning during the exam. And someone had said Stravos, it was made more handsome when they rebuilt it. And Stravos, if you remember, he was the high mage that was part Quen. So this sounds like they're kind of whitewashing Stravos, right? Making him look probably more like Tyrion than Quen.
Right, which is also something that I did say last time too.
Right.
Or like a couple episodes ago. Like, oh,
Yeah.
like was because you're saying he was a 4th Quen, but maybe he was sounded like to me from the history he was fully Quen.
Right. He was more Quen than what they were saying because they were whitewashing him. And then they're just continuing to do so here by changing the way he looked, probably more towards Tyrion than Quen.
Yeah, for sure. That was a good pick. I don't even think I caught that, so that was a good catch.
Yeah. Look at that. All right. And then it's time for them to show off their work that they did for the barrier expansion. Renthorn shows his group's work first. Then the Archmages almost forget about Siona and ask her if she had anything to add. And it was kind of like an afterthought. In fact, I think somebody had to remind one of them of her.
I think did. I feel like
it
did
might have
she
been
not?
Brigham or something. It might have been her too. Yeah, I don't remember, but it was almost an afterthought, really, of them asking for her input.
Yeah, and they asked if she wanted to add on to Renthorn's. As opposed to like, do you have something different
right,
to
her
tell
own
us?
Stuff, right.
Yeah.
And she says, hell yeah, I got something, motherfucker.
She sure did.
So Siona at first shows a much more detailed window to the other realm, not the full perfect visual she's capable of making that we saw last. And the Archmages are mostly in awe, but some seem angry at her for modifying the traditional spell. Next, Siona goes on to actually show her spell that shows the other realm as vivid as possible, just like you're staring at a TV screen, stating that it's the Quen's territory that they're seeing in the current world. She opens up the mirror and she explains how siphoning kills plants, animals, and humans, and that the Archmage Council has known this all along. And there's a quote I like here as this is going on, and she's telling them this, shocked and enraged and stuff. And it says, as Siona turned back to the council, the expressions there still range from shock to rage, but no hint of guilt to be found.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy how she shows them a literal view of the other realm, and some of them still say she's lying. Like, I wonder, had she not known that this was the Quinn, how they would have reacted? Because she was gonna come to them with all of this anyway. Remember, she was like super excited. She was like, I just like built a mirror into to see the other realm. No one has ever seen the other realm like this. And that's when Thama was like, that's actually the Quinn. So what if Thama hadn't been there to tell her that that
Yeah.
was the Quinn? Like, what would they have done? Because even like Archmage Renthorn, he says his hearsay and threatens his son for not denying it either. Because ew, like Renthorn was over here just like cackling about it. He was like, why not show them that we do have all of this power? And Renthorn's like,
Right.
shut up. Don't say that, you crazy sadist son that I have, because they still don't want everybody to know that it is the Quinn, even though
Right.
everybody does know it's the Quinn.
Everybody important anyway.
Right.
Because even in the middle of all this, there were other lower ranking mages that hadn't figured it out yet, but now they know.
Yeah, so I wonder like how they would have responded. Like, what if Siona had come to them all excited and been like, look at what I did? You know, like what would they have done?
Right. And they were very outraged by this, the Archmages, and a couple of them, I think it was Gamwin and Archmage Supreme Ornell, tried to reason in quotes with Siona. Gamwin was saying she has a good heart and has sympathy for her pain. Then he begins to just gaslight her with religion and how it's God's way and it's God's punishment for those that defy him. And that's why the Quinn have to suffer. At around noon, however, Siona's plan goes off. And her plan, at least the first part of it, made mirrors showing exactly where the magic power is coming from on every little use of magic throughout the day. That means everyone in Tyrion, the entire city, was seeing where the power came from in vivid detail. So if they were heating up some tea, a little mirror popped up and they saw exactly what the blight killed just to heat up some tea.
Yeah, which was super crazy. I didn't see that. I didn't see that coming, that she was going to do that. That was cool. And I thought I thought that Siona was really powerful in this chapter. I love that she was coming at all of them with their own religious texts to show their hypocrisy. Like they would start, like there was even one time where one of them was like saying a prayer and she finished it for him.
Right.
Like really calling out his hypocrisy on it. But however, she still continues to show her naivete to me by believing that people would be outraged by this and do the right thing after learning this and being called out. She obviously doesn't expect what we later find out happens in this next chapter 20.
Right. And at the end of this chapter, she's arrested for doing this.
Right. I feel like she did expect to maybe get arrested, but I don't think
so.
You don't
I
think
think
so?
she expected everybody to be like, oh God, look what we're doing. We shouldn't be doing this.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. But I feel like it was still kind of, I don't know if she expected it per se, but I think she did. I think there was a moment where she was like, I mean, yeah, I might get arrested, but it's worth like telling the truth, because I do think people are gonna be more upset about it. Like maybe she thought, I'll get arrested maybe, but then they'll come around.
Yeah,
I think that's more of like what was in her head. She's like, I mean, it might not go over well for the first like 20 minutes, but I know they'll come around, which as we'll see.
Yeah. Which brings us into chapter 20. This chapter was called Made Monstrous, but I like to call it It's Time to Rage Against the Machine. Some of those that burn crosses are the same that hold office. So the Quinn of the city start rioting after seeing that it was the blight that powered the city and killed all of their people. So Siona's taken to jail at this time, and Alba comes to visit her and tells her that the Quinn are rioting, and Alba blames it all on Siona and doesn't feel the same way Siona feels about this at all. And this makes Siona very heartbroken over this, because she thought Alba would side with her, but she didn't. And she says she didn't think about how this would affect the Quinn, even though Thamel tried to warn her about it. And this is kind of like a little callback, right, to Thamel's parable, where good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that naivete, just not realizing what such a brash way of coming about this would do to not only the Quinn, but also the Tyrannish. Like honestly, her plan, it was just not thought through at all. No one thought about the High Magistrate, because it comes out later that they're telling people she's she's a witch and this is witchcraft. Like, of course they were going to cover it up. Of course they were going to make up some kind of lie about it. And I'm not really sure what she thought would happen or why she wouldn't have a plan for the aftermath of it. Which now that I'm thinking about it, I don't even just blame her anymore. I also blame Thommel because, yeah, he was like, I mean, I don't think this is a good idea. But he didn't do too much to argue with her or keep her from doing it or consult with anybody else. Like, it's just you and this one girl and your 14-year-old niece. Like, like,
right. Who's going to start the revolution, right? These three people.
Yeah. And there was no back and forth. There was no like, well, maybe we should get some other people involved in this plan just in case things do blow up. This should have been a years long plan. This should have been a years long revolution, not an overnight one.
Right.
So that's a bit frustrating to me.
Yeah, and then from there, Brigham takes Siona back to his estate to await her trial the next day.
Yeah, and here Siona really sees just how corrupt like everybody is because she just had Alba completely disappoint her, and now Brigham, who's already disappointed her, but is being the monster now. Like she's seeing him maiming and killing everyone who gets in his way. And again, I'm just annoyed. Like someone should have told the Quinn that all of this was going down. Like Thommel should have been having a little whisper session. This should have been word of mouth. Like, hey, like, guess what? Everything that we've known is a lie and the blight is actually the magic and here's what's going to go down at this time, so be prepared.
Right, because he's been there for 10 years. You would think he would at least have some kind of close friends.
Right,
that he could talk to about it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it came from her impatience as well. She's just really impatient. She's really naive. And it really hindered them from having a proper revolution. And I think she should feel guilty for causing all of this and not being smarter about it or consulting with Thommel and the other Quinn about doing these crazy plans. There was no organization. And that is the number one thing that any revolution needs is organization. And there was none.
Right. All right. Moving on to chapter 21, Damsel and Demon. Siona, the damsel. So she has this long conversation with Brigham, the demon, where she realizes why he wanted her to succeed as the first woman high mage. She is basically his penance for what he's doing to all the women in his factory, in his factories, you know, with the dyes and whatnot that's making them infertile. So Brigham tells Siona that they will put her to death, but he doesn't want her to die and pleads with her to throw herself upon the court's mercy. And then he asks her if she has any last words that she would like in case, you know, the worst happens, and he won't let her write it down. So he transcribes a letter for Siona to her aunt and cousin.
Yeah. And I really hated that. I really hated that her last words couldn't be her last words and that a man felt the need to write them for her. So again, rewriting history. And then every time she would say something, he'd be like, what? What do you mean? Are you sure? Are you sure you want to say, you don't want to say, you really don't want to apologize for, you really guilting her further, trying to, you know, make her write down things that she doesn't actually want to say. And oh my God, I hated that. I hated that man for that. That was so frustrating and annoying, but makes sense for this world.
And the reason he did that is because I think he's scared of her a little bit. He was worried that she would be able to write spells by hand instead of using a spellograph. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. He was really scared. They're really trying to burn this witch at the stake. Like he was fearful of her. Crazy.
But the next morning, she's taken to her trial where she is unanimously found guilty and sentenced to death, meaning Brigham even voted for her to be put to death.
Mm-hmm.
She's given a vial of poison, which she drinks, and then she feels a rumble and knows that Thommel has put the second part of her plan into play, which brings us into chapter 22, Hope in Hellfire. So we see a little flashback of Siona and Thommel discussing the last spell of the plan, and then once Siona has left, Thommel isn't sure he wants to do it, and instead he asks Kara what he should do. Kara says, burn them motherfuckers. She says, unleash the spell on them.
Mm-hmm.
So he does, and the spell blights everyone in Leon Hall and kills almost all of the high mages.
Right, which that was pretty epic. The blight taking all of them was really cool. It was very poetic. It was very terrifying. The imagery was awesome too, especially when Siona describes what it looks like because she's numb and she can't feel it happening, but she's seeing it happen. The author, I think, does a really, really good job of just like imagery. So that was really cool, and it felt like poetic justice. I really liked that. But also, again, what now that almost everyone in charge is dead? Like, what is the plan? No one's set to be in charge after, no one's organized. If you're going to tear down a whole system, you need to have some kind of plan on who's going to take over. And all Thonel did was consult one 14-year-old girl. And now listen, I liked that moment with Thomel and Kara, with him essentially asking her as the younger generation what to do because it was her future. I really liked that because I think that that's something that we should be doing in our society. We should be listening to the younger generation more on what they want. But what about all the other Quinn? What about everybody else? Like, nobody asked what they want. So, again, truly annoyed by how poor planned of a revolution this is.
Right. And I think a lot of that falls on Thomel here because Siona didn't even really expect the Quinn to rise up when she showed everything in the mirrors. Even though Thomel did warn her, she didn't really think about it too hard. And Thomel should have been a little more like, no, this is what's going to probably happen. And we need a plan to rally those Quinn or something, or at least organize them into something instead of an unruly mob that's probably not going to do so well against powerful magic.
Yeah, and then, and with that, his whole dilemma about even coming, going through with this plan was more of like, what does that make me having all of this blood on my hands? And he's not like unsure if he wants to do it because of that. And then he just ultimately decides like, yes, I am going to do it after, consulting with Kara. That's such a huge decision you just made by yourself for an entire group of people. So yeah, going back, like I do feel like Thomel should have pushed harder, worked better, talked to more people.
Right.
Yeah.
You are not happy with the organization of this revolution.
He's just so concerned about what it meant for his morality when it's like you should have been more concerned about what it meant for your people, bro.
Right.
So, because then ultimately he's the one who decides to do it, and he does it without any there's no, I don't know. He had all this power in his hand. They could have waited a few days. They could have waited till the next time they were all gathered in there after they already killed Siona, and then Siona would have been a martyr. Then he could have told all of the Quinn, you know what? Siona actually died because we found out about this information. So now what are we going to do about it? And I have all this power in my hands. Like, hello?
Right, but I don't know. I think he was afraid of getting caught with it.
Yeah, well, that's just, you got to make a plan for that too.
Which he did get caught with it, which we'll see here shortly in the next chapter, right?
Right.
This chapter, though, ends with a letter of the letter of recommendation that Archmage Brigham wrote on Siona's behalf to apply for High Mage. And there's one line in there that I like. It says, "It is my firm belief that her induction into our ranks will herald a new era of magic and expansion." And he was not wrong. Definitely a new era of magic coming along here with most of them dead, almost all of them dead. So chapter 23, Out of Oblivion. So not every mage was in attendance, like we said, at Siona's trial. Renthorn and Mordra the 10th tracked down Thomel. Renthorn is loving the destruction that Siona brought on because he's a friggin' maniac. And he proclaims himself Archmage Supreme.
I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But that didn't last long because Kara jumps off the roof because she had run away when they saw them with the spellograph, and she crushes his head and his dream of being Archmage Supreme with that spellograph and kills him. And then Thomel lets Mordra live, making him the highest ranking mage now, right? And Thomel tells Mordra not to forget this day and calls him Archmage Supreme. So the whole irony here is that one of the worst mages of the high mages, who probably shouldn't have even been let in at that exam, is now in charge of it all. And that's what City of Tyrion is left with. So then from here, Thomel and Kara escape with some other Quinn into the mountains as the barrier starts expanding to the west. And to me, this was, I don't know, I didn't like it either. I didn't like this part. It seemed kind of rushed. Like, what are they going to do? Obviously, yes, they can't stay in the city, but just they go to the mountains and then now what? This is a standalone book, so it leaves it up to the reader what they think. But I mean, it's still a lot you got to think about here and what's going to happen.
Yeah, I did not like this ending. I think the Mordra and Renthorn scene felt like forced and a sloppy way to tie things up. Like, why weren't they even there? Why did Renthorn decide not to be there? Did he have a feeling that was going to happen? And he just went straight to find Thought. Like, there was no, I don't know why they were there.
Well,
I don't know how they got there.
I think they did explain that a little bit. I think the author did explain that a little bit. That he
Did
did
she?
have a yeah, I think there was something about he did have a feeling because he knew that it was that, Thama was her assistant. So
Yeah, but that's
I
still
think he
but
knew she was up to something.
yeah, but even that just, like, having a feeling,
Yeah, it is kind
kinda
of
sloppy,
yeah,
kind of
I agree.
kind of forced. The Quinn all being forced to flee again, like you said, like, they didn't there was no fighting back, they just ran away again. That kinda sucks, I feel like, for them as a people. There are also just so many loose ends, unanswered questions about their government, because she mentions in her trial that 2 of the politicians aren't there, and one of them being the woman politician. The author mentions them siphoning out of the coordinates given, like, back when she was stealing, or back when they were oh yeah, because she was stealing all of the barrier expansion things, and they came in and they were talking about, like, the forbidden coordinates, or like what, or like we should expand past what's given to us, and they were like, no, that's, we don't know if we should do that. They never touched back on that, because I thought, oh, this is such a good way to, like, bring in the politics of this world, because that's probably they're fighting about it.
Yeah, and I remember early in the book when the female politician came up that we were wondering how she's going to fit into the story, and there's really nothing.
Yeah, and she
I
didn't. So then
mean,
why
and she didn't
why
even show up to the trial. I mean, she wasn't even there at the end.
That's what I'm saying. So why bring her up in the beginning? Why bring it up in the end that she didn't show up? And then we have
Yeah,
no resolution on that. So I wanted more politics, because we really just got more religious stuff.
right.
What was the point of there even being a whole political section? And no one was really fighting for anything. No one was fighting for anything. And I didn't like that. And then
Yeah.
and then the Quinn just ran away.
I think in the end, we just wanted more, and there just wasn't enough there.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is. Maybe she plans on, maybe ML Wang plans on maybe making another foray into this world. But, then, you don't have Siona anymore unless she does like a prequel. But I don't think we really want that. I think we want to know what happens after this.
Yeah, I'm just not sure of her making another book. Like, she could have made Siona such a martyr, but then if you already kill most of all of the other people and leave this random man in charge, like,
Right.
and then most of the Quinn fled, it's like, they're not gonna, why would they come back?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Not a satisfying ending.
So overall, what we thought about this book, I did my usual written up review, and I'll just read that here. So this book tackles some important themes, how it weaves colonization, misogyny, and racism into the heart of its narrative. The exploration of colonization is particularly striking, with its portrayal of cultural erasure and exploitation that parallels real-world histories. The commentary on misogyny and racism adds depth, forcing the reader to confront systemic injustices woven into the story's world. However, while I appreciated the commentary on these themes, it sometimes felt like too much was being juggled at once. About halfway through the book, the pacing began to stall as the weight of these interconnected issues seemed to slow the momentum of the story. And this made certain sections feel a bit muddled to me, as if the narrative couldn't decide where its focus should lie. And then character-wise, I think Thomel stood out as the only figure who felt fully realized. His struggles and complexities brought a grounding sense of humanity to the story, but the rest of the cast felt underdeveloped, making it harder to stay invested in their arcs. And I really wanted a lot more from Kara. It just seemed so wasted to me, her character. I felt let down that she didn't participate as much as I would have liked. And overall, despite the book's flaws, it's a thought-provoking story with important things to say. And it may not have hit every mark, but I think it's worth reading for its bold approach, and I would give it 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, definitely too many issues tackled at once for a standalone. Too many loose ends, unanswered questions. I didn't know who was fighting or what they were fighting for. Like you said, they really could have done something with Kara. Was a huge missed opportunity, because she did want to fight, so they could have used her for that. She was touched by the blight, all of this stuff. It did make it seem like she was going to be much more of a main character. To me, it didn't really feel like there was a real plot, just a lot of trying to speak on the issues of colonization, feminism, and racism, which is great. We should be talking about those things. But this felt like a book I would give to a teenager who was just learning how to critically think about these things, who was just starting to come into this world, who's just starting to kind of be a little more radicalized. I would give I would give them this book. I did really like all the imagery though, and I don't feel like Wang is a bad writer. I think she could have just taken the time to maybe write more books in this world. Maybe she will, but coming from the approach that this is a standalone right now, she could have wrote more books in this world with these specific characters and really developed the ideologies that she was trying to express. And it could have been more expounded on. Like, this could have been a whole series following Siona and Thommel starting a revolution, but it fell flat at the end and left me pretty unsatisfied. But I do appreciate a story that tries to deal with complex issues in our society. So I give it a 3 out of 5.
Yeah, definitely would have probably liked to seen a series out of this, at least a trilogy. Because like you said, they could have started here and then made the revolution part a little bit bigger and actually have some planning, right? Some organization.
And then she also could have just done more about like, okay, well, the first book I want to focus more on the misogyny. And then the second book I want to focus more on the colonization. And then the third book I want to focus more on the religion and the pot. And you know, like she could have really like actually taken the time instead of having to throw everything all in at once to make us feel like there wasn't a plot. She could have like expanded on these things over time.
And I think we have to take in mind that this is her second novel. She's written some young adult stuff, and then she also wrote Sword of Kaigen, which I've heard is really good also. So I think you have to take that in mind, where I think this was actually self-published before it was picked up about a year and a half ago. I think that's what I'm thinking. And so maybe that's why she didn't really write a big series. Like maybe if she had gotten a contract, she would have wrote a big series on this world. Yeah. And maybe that has something to do with it. So I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt there that maybe she just felt like she couldn't do a full series on it right now because of where she's at in her career.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
But I also think she's a good writer. I mean, the writing was really good.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I mean, a lot of the imagery, that's why I always kind of felt like this book is like dragging, but also it's not dragging at the same time, because I felt like she was really good at writing. Like I felt like she was good at the dialogue and the imagery and everything, but it would just, because there were so many topics she was trying to deal with at once, it just felt like there was no plot. So even though I felt like I'm reading through this pretty fast, like the pacing feels nice to me in that way, but I'm just lost onto what we're fighting for at this point, or if we're even fighting for anything anymore.
Right. And that's something I criticize too, is all those topics are great to talk about, but maybe it was just too much at once.
Yeah.
And that's it for the finale of Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. What an incredible journey this book has taken us on, full of twists and emotional moments. Thank you so much for joining us as we explored this amazing story.
It's been such a fun ride, and we can't wait to hear what you all thought about the ending. Make sure to share your final thoughts with us on social media: Discord, TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky, and the new bookish app, Tome Fantasy. Links are in the show notes. We'd love to hear your takeaways, favorite moments, and overall impressions.
But don't close your books just yet, because we're moving on to our next read, James by Percival Everett. We'll be starting with part 1, chapters 1 through 17, so grab a copy and get ready to join us for a whole new adventure.
Our first discussion on James will drop on Friday, February 7th, so mark your calendars. We're really excited to dive into this one, and I hope you'll read along with us.
Thank you again for being part of our book club and for making this journey so special. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider leaving a review and sharing it with your fellow bookworms. It really helps us grow and keep the conversation going.
Thanks for listening, and here's to more great stories ahead.
Take care, family, and we'll see you on February 7th for James. Bye for now. Our intro music is Upbeat Funk, performed by Mikhail Smusev, and our outro music is Lo-Fi Chill, medium version, performed by Bodan Kuzman. You can find both tracks on pixabay.com. Thanks for joining us, family, and we'll see you next week.